body's been sending you signals you've been trained to ignore. That gut feeling about someone, that instant knowing before logic catches up. That's not intuition being mysterious, it's your nervous system processing electromagnetic data faster than your thinking mind can translate. Here's what nobody tells you. The top 1% aren't smarter or luckier. They've just learned to read the internal dashboard everyone else was taught to override. This video reveals what coherence actually is, why you weren't taught to access it, and how to use it right now. You'll discover why your most effortless moments aren't accidents, they're what happens when your entire system finally stops fighting itself. If you've been sensing something deeper beneath surface reality, this confirms what you already know.
About 3 weeks back, you shared words with someone that carried a different quality. It wasn't what you both said, but the silence that lived between each sentence. Something was moving beneath your conversation that had no label, yet you sensed it with complete clarity. That other person picked up on it as well, even though nobody spoke it out loud. A kind of sync was taking place, a natural beat that showed up without any pushing. The minutes felt like they were stretching out and shrinking down at the exact same time. Thoughts would pop into your head just moments before they got voiced by the other person. When you walked away from that talk, you felt more alive instead of drained. Despite tackling some pretty heavy subjects, you've been noticing more of these moments showing up in your world lately. Times when everything just falls into place without any wrestling. Stretches where your body acts before your brain figures things out. Situations where the exact right person shows up at the perfect second, dropping the precise words you needed to hear with timing that feels almost impossible to explain. Most folks write these off as lucky breaks. They label them as chance events that randomly bunch together and keep moving through their days. But you've picked up on something different. These experiences aren't scattered. They group themselves around certain inner states. They surface when you're carrying a specific internal setup that you can't really put into words, but you absolutely know it when it's there. This ability to spot and move with it is what sets apart the top 1% from everybody else. Not how smart they are, not what spiritual practices they do, not positive thoughts or manifestation tricks. It's the skill to sense and steer by something that regular language can't name, but controls absolutely everything about how your actual life plays out. Scientists have a word for it, they call it coherence. But that term doesn't really catch what you're living through. It sounds too scientific, too cold, too separated from the actual feeling that happens when your whole system drops into this state. When folks hear coherence, their minds go to laser beams or things vibrating together. They don't picture that sensation in your chest when you know without any doubt that you're standing exactly where you're meant to stand, doing precisely what you're meant to do, even when it doesn't make logical sense to anyone watching from outside. Here's what's really going down. Your body works like this incredibly advanced tool that handles information way quicker and more spot on than your thinking mind. Every single cell you've got is continuously picking up electromagnetic fields, chemical messages, pressure shifts, temperature changes, and tons of other information streams that never make it to your conscious mind. All this data gets woven together into what people call intuition, or that gut sense or instinct. But these words make it seem like some mysterious and shaky thing when it's actually the most advanced processing machine you can tap into. Your heart, by itself, creates an electromagnetic field that reaches out several feet past your physical body. This field holds details about what's happening inside you, how you're feeling emotionally, your stress situation, whether you're open or closed off. Other people's nervous systems pick up this field on autopilot, without thinking about it, and they react based on what they sense. This explains why you can step into a space and instantly feel the tension, even when everybody's got smiles on their faces. This is why certain people feel comfortable to hang around, while others set off quiet warning bells inside you. This is why some talks create that sync effect, while other conversations feel like you're dragging yourself through thick mud. When your system hits coherence, something pretty amazing happens to this electromagnetic signal you're putting out. Instead of sending out noise, random, static, mixed up messages, your field gets organized. It starts working like a tuning fork, vibrating at a particular frequency that other coherent systems can pick up and relate to. This isn't some poetic comparison. This is actual physics you can measure happening right now. The HeartMath Institute has spent decades researching this stuff, using tools sensitive enough to pick up on these field effects. They've shown proof that when somebody drops into a coherent state, their heart rhythm pattern turns smooth and flowing instead of jumpy and all over the place. This shift in pattern flows through your whole nervous system, touching your brainwaves, how your hormones get made, your immune system's reactions, and dozens of other body processes. But here's the really interesting part. They found out that this coherent state spreads to others. When one person in a bunch of people enters coherence, it gets easier for the rest to access that same state. These organized fields seem to pull each other into rhythm, kind of like pendulum clocks hung on the same wall that slowly start swinging together. You've lived through this without knowing what to name it. Those stretches of easy flow with another human, those talks where thoughts stack on each other with such smooth momentum that later on, neither of you can recall who actually said what. Those team-ups where what you create together becomes genuinely bigger than what each person could do alone. That's not about chemistry or getting along well or having good ways to communicate. That's coherent field interaction. Your electromagnetic signals matched up and started running as one connected system for a while. Now here's where things get really interesting. Most folks bump into coherence by accident. They trip into it during amazing experiences, moments of deep bonding, creative flow stretches, or when they're out in nature, far from the messy electromagnetic chaos of today's world. They feel incredible during these times, but they have zero clue how they landed there or how to get back on purpose. So they run after the feeling by trying to set up the same outside conditions, working to copy the setup that brings the state, never catching on that coherence is something you create from the inside that then molds your outside world, not the flip side. The 1% who get this have figured out how to spot when they're in coherence and when they've slipped out of it. Even more importantly, they've figured out how to create coherence whenever they want, regardless of what's happening around them. This hands them something that looks like pure magic from where you're standing, but it's really just skilled movement through rules that run every human nervous system. Think about how you know when hunger hits. You don't need medical tests to catch dropping blood sugar numbers. Your body's got sensors built in that make a feeling you've learned to name as hunger. Coherence runs the same way. Your system's got sensors that catch when you're in this state, but most people never learn to read that signal with their conscious mind. The feeling is quiet but clear. Once you learn what you're hunting for, it's like everything in your body is heading the same direction. There's a lineup, a sense of all your systems working together instead of fighting each other. Your chest feels wide open instead of tight and closed. Your breathing just happens naturally, without any forcing. Your mind is awake but not spinning. Thoughts show up clean without that usual background noise of worry or beating yourself up. Time feels roomy. You're right here in this moment, but you're not stuck in it. You can grab memories and think about tomorrow without stepping out of right now. Body sensations that usually show up as uncomfortable become just information instead. You can feel worn out without that becoming something you need to fix. You can feel sad without falling into a black hole. You can feel angry without it taking over what you do. The feelings are all there, fully experienced, but they're not calling the shots. You get to feel the information they're giving you while keeping the power to pick your reaction. This is what coherence really does. It doesn't make you feel fake, positive, or push down hard emotions. It builds enough inner breathing room that you can feel everything without getting knocked over by anything. You turn into something like the ocean that can carry waves of any height without forgetting its basic nature as ocean. The reason only 1% work from this understanding isn't because it's hard or takes years of training. It's because the culture you grew up inside actively taught you away from it. From when you were little, people taught you to put outside approval above your internal sensing. You picked up how to ignore what your body tells you, so you could listen to authority people telling you what you should feel, want, need, or do. You got trained to chase approval, obey the rules, blend in, and measure yourself against outside benchmarks instead of building up your sensitivity to your own system's messages. By the time you became an adult, you'd gotten deeply cut off from the exact tool that could guide you most reliably through living. You learned to push past tiredness with coffee, stuff down hard emotions with distractions or substances, ignore your intuitive warnings so you could rely on logical thinking, and trust what experts say over what you directly experience. This organized cutting off from internal sensing is so normal now that most folks don't even see it as being cut off. They figure their constant stress, emotional reactions, and trouble making choices is just what life is, instead of seeing these as signs of running outside coherence. Here's something you can try right this second. Place your hand on your heart. Feel it pumping. Now ask yourself, do you know what rhythm would be best for this exact moment? Do you know if the speed it's beating right now is helping you or stressing you out? Most people don't have a clue. They're totally separated from this basic body information that's sitting there every single second of every single day. This is like trying to drive a vehicle without ever checking the dashboard. You'll eventually reach where you're headed, but you're going to waste resources and probably mess up the engine along the way. The people who understand coherence have plugged back into their internal dashboard. They've learned to read their own system state moment after moment. This lets them make tiny adjustments all the time. Instead of waiting until everything crashes before they notice something's off, they feel stress starting to pile up and do something before it gets too heavy to handle. They notice when they're drifting away from what they authentically want and fix their path before they've poured years into the wrong road. They catch when they're trying to push something that's not ready to unfold and switch to a different way before they burn themselves out. This might sound tiring, like you'd need to watch your internal state every single second, but it's actually the reverse. Once you build up your sensitivity to coherence, keeping it running becomes easier than working outside of it. Coherence is what your system naturally does when you're not actively messing it up. The hard work comes from forcing yourself into shapes that go against your real structure. When you quit doing that, when you start respecting what your system is actually telling you, everything gets simpler. Choices that used to eat up weeks of painful thinking become crystal clear. You know what's right not because you've picked apart every option, but because your body hands you clear feedback. One path makes an internal feeling of opening up, rightness, yes. Other paths make you contract, resist, no. You stop arguing with yourself and start trusting the signals your system gives. This doesn't mean you never think stuff through. It means you use thinking as a tool to help decisions that bubble up from coherent sensing, instead of trying to crush your sensing with pure brain power. Relationships shift when you work from coherence. You quit trying to control what others think of you and start being real. This feels scary at first because you've been taught to believe that being real will get you rejected, but something you didn't expect happens. The people who vibe with your actual frequency can finally locate you. The relationships that needed constant work and acting start dropping away on their own. What stays are bonds with real depth, where both people get to be genuine without pretending, where coherence in one person helps coherence in the other. You've probably noticed that some people make you feel more like yourself, while others make you feel like you're playing a character. That's field interaction happening. Some people's electromagnetic signals work well with yours, setting up conditions where both systems can be coherent at the same time. Other people's fields make interference patterns that turn coherence tough or impossible to hold on to. This isn't about calling anyone good or bad. It's about recognizing that not every system is supposed to connect closely, and that's totally okay. The 1% who get this quit forcing bonds that need them to drop their own coherence to keep going. Work shifts big time from this angle. Instead of doing what you're supposed to do or what looks most impressive or profitable, you start following what brings coherence. You grab projects that make your system brighten up and turn down chances that make you contract inside, even when they look amazing on paper. This looks risky from outside because you're saying no to sure things for uncertain roads, but you've found that coherent action brings results that incoherent action can't touch, even with way more effort. Stuff flows when you're running from this state. Roadblocks melt, resources show up, the right people appear. Not through some magical force, but because your coherent field is sending out a clean signal that other coherent systems can sense and connect with. Here's what nobody mentions about success, real success, instead of just looking successful. Every person you've ever looked up to, everyone who's built something meaningful or lived with unusual realness, they were working from coherence. They might not have used that word. They might have talked about chasing their passion or trusting their gut or following, but under the words, they were steering by this internal sense of rightness that goes beyond logic and what society says is right. You can feel when somebody's coherent. Doesn't matter if they're speaking to a crowd, putting words on pages, creating music, leading a company, or just moving through their regular day. There's something you can't miss about the vibe. Their work has honesty. Their presence has weight. They're not faking being real. They're actually being real. And your system spots this right away because coherence recognizes coherence. It's like two tuning forks humming at the same note. There's an instant sense of yes, this is true, this is real. The flip side is just as clear once you've learned to catch it. You can sense when someone's performing, when they're running from fear or panic or needing approval. Their energy feels forced, tight, like they're pushing against the natural current. This doesn't make them wrong or bad people. It just means they're unplugged from coherence, running on the programmed patterns they learned instead of from their authentic setup. Most folks spend their whole lives in this condition because they never met anyone who could show them another way exists. This is why the 1% who understand coherence create such massive impact. They're not brighter or more gifted or more lucky than anyone else. They've just learned to work from a state that lets their complete capacity come out. When you're in coherence, you can reach creativity, insight, intuition, and energy that totally disappear when you're stressed, worried, performing, or trying to control what happens. It's like comparing a car with the parking brakes stuck on versus one running free. Same engine, totally different results. Now here's the question that really counts. If coherence is so valuable, so reachable, so life-changing, why don't schools teach this? Why isn't this something everybody knows? Why do most people live their whole lives without finding out how to steer by their own internal guidance system? The answer feels uncomfortable, but you need to understand it. The systems you grew up inside, school systems, money systems, social systems, religious systems, they need you to stay unplugged from coherence to work right. They need you chasing outside approval so you'll work for people liking you. They need you doubting what you know so you'll trust authorities. They need you running from fear and feeling like there's not enough so you'll compete and buy stuff and stay busy enough not to question how things are really set up. A whole population working from coherence would be impossible for these systems to control. People would make choices based on what builds real wellness instead of what produces outside signs of success. They'd refuse to join activities that go against their honesty, no matter what money gets offered. They'd create communities built around ideas that support coherence instead of taking advantage of its missing. This isn't some wild theory. It's just seeing that systems keep themselves going, and systems built on disconnection need ongoing disconnection to stay alive. You weren't taught to spot and keep coherence because that knowledge would make you resistant to being manipulated, pushed around, and controlled. It would make you free in a way that scares the people holding power. But here's what those systems didn't see coming. Coherence spreads. Once you learn to make and keep it, you become a broadcasting point for others. Your field starts touching everyone you deal with, making it easier for them to reach their own coherence. You don't need to preach or teach or explain. Your simple being there start shifting the field around you. Some people will feel pulled toward that. Others will push back hard because it threatens their familiar ways. Both reactions give you information about who's ready for this transmission and who's not. In the comments, drop one word that captures the energy you're choosing to carry forward. Maybe it's alignment. Maybe it's ease. Maybe it's power. Maybe it's something uniquely yours. Let that word be a small but profound declaration, a signal like a quantum seed you plant not just in this space but in the quantum field. The work of building coherence isn't complicated, but it needs your steady attention. You start by learning to catch your current state multiple times through your day. Stop and ask yourself, am I in coherence right now? Don't judge whatever answer shows up. Just notice. What does coherence feel like in your body? What does being out of coherence feel like? Get familiar with the sensations, the qualities, the specific signatures of each state. You'll find that certain activities, people, places, thoughts, and actions support coherence, while others mess it up. This isn't about calling things good or bad. It's about becoming like a scientist studying your own system. What helps you reach coherence? What yanks you out of it? The answers will be unique to you, though some patterns show up for everyone. Most people find that nature, creative stuff, genuine connection, and moving your body support coherence, while too much screen time, processed food, toxic relationships, and being dishonest disrupt it. Once you can catch your state reliably, you can start learning to shift it on purpose. When you notice you've dropped out of coherence, you've got options. Sometimes the answer is changing what's happening outside you. Walk away from the stressful place. Stop the conversation that's draining you. Take a break from the task that's overwhelming you. Other times, the answer is changing how you're responding inside. Breathe in a different way. Move your body differently. Point your attention towards something that supports coherence. Remind yourself what actually matters. The key is learning to catch the disconnection early instead of waiting until you're totally overwhelmed. This is like adjusting a ship's direction. Small fixes made often keep you on track with hardly any effort. Waiting until you're miles off path takes massive energy to get back. You'll also find that coherence isn't some permanent condition you hit and then hold forever. It's moving, responding to what's happening, always changing. Sometimes you're deeply coherent. Sometimes you're a bit off. Sometimes you're completely unplugged. All of this is normal. The goal isn't to never fall out of coherence. The goal is to notice when you have, understand why it happened, and know how to come back. What shows up over time is a kind of steering wisdom. You start understanding the difference between helpful discomfort that's making you grow and damaging stress that's hurting your system. You learn when to push through resistance and when to respect your limits. You build up the ability to know which outside pressures to work with and which to reject completely. None of this comes from following rules or expert advice. It comes from learning to read your own system with growing skill. The transformation isn't big or sudden. It's thousands of tiny choices piling up to honor coherence over programming. Each time you pick being real over getting approval, each time you trust your sensing over social pressure, each time you say no to what makes you contract inside, and yes to what makes you expand, you're building new brain pathways and electromagnetic patterns. Your system learns that coherence is safe, can be sustained, and works reliably. The old patterns of stress, performing, and disconnection start fading just from not using them anymore. What you'll spot first is that problems that used to eat up tons of energy start working themselves out naturally. You quit forcing answers and start letting them surface. You realize that so much of what you thought was necessary was really just habit. You discover that you have way more choice about how to react to what happens than you ever imagined. Most importantly, you remember that you know stuff. Your system carries wisdom that doesn't need outside approval or logical proof. You can trust it. But before we move forward, I want to invite you into something real. If you've been feeling like something's making sense And if a part of you is realizing your own power, tap like if you just had an aha moment, because like attracts like. Hit subscribe and the bell icon next to it. Stay with this space, grow with us. This isn't just a channel, it's a frequency. If you felt a nudge or a change while watching, you're already tuned in. We're not just watching content, we're practicing new ways of being. We're not just absorbing, we're creating possibilities. We're not just learning, we're remembering. I'm truly glad you're here. Let's keep growing and shifting together. Welcome to the 1%. Not because you're special, but because you're willing to learn what was always sitting there, but rarely taught. The only question now is, how coherent are you ready to become? There's something else that happens as you build this skill that nobody brings up in the beginning because it sounds too weird until you've lived it yourself. Your sense of time starts to change in a basic way. Not in some mystical sense, but in a very hands-on, noticeable way that touches how you move through your days. When you're working from being out of coherence, time feels like it's happening to you. You're always racing against deadlines, feeling behind, living that sensation of never having enough hours to do what needs doing. Your attention breaks apart across multiple demands at once, which builds the felt experience of not having enough time. You're physically sitting in one moment while mentally practicing the next. This splitting across time makes everything take longer because you're never fully engaged with what's right in front of you. Coherence collapses this breaking apart. When you're fully present, when all your systems are synced up and pointing the same direction, time expands. Not because the clock runs differently, but because you're actually living inside each moment instead of skimming across the surface of your life. A talk that might have eaten up 30 distracted minutes happens in 15 focused ones, and you remember more information because you were actually there for it. A task that normally eats an hour gets done in 30 minutes because you're not at the same time fighting internal resistance, looking at your phone, and wondering if you should be doing something else instead. This builds a feedback loop that most people never find. Coherence makes efficiency. Efficiency makes spaciousness. Spaciousness lets you keep coherence more easily. The reverse is also true. Being out of coherence makes struggle. Struggle makes exhaustion. Exhaustion makes it harder to reach coherence. Once you see these patterns clearly, you realize that the time scarcity most people live isn't about having too much to do. It's a symptom of doing everything from a broken-up state that needs 3 times the energy and time as the same activity done coherently. You'll also notice your sleep patterns shift. Not necessarily that you sleep more or less, but the quality changes. Dreams get clearer, more organized, sometimes holding information that turns out useful when you wake up. You might start waking naturally without alarms, your system having built enough sensitivity to know when restoration is complete. The constant tiredness that used to mark your mornings starts melting away as your nervous system learns to handle the day's experiences during sleep instead of dragging unresolved stress into the next cycle. Physical health responds to sustained coherence in ways that seem way bigger than how simple the practice is. Chronic tension patterns you've held for years, the tight shoulders, the clenched jaw, the shallow breathing, these start releasing without you directly working on them. Your immune response gets more efficient. You get sick less often, and when you do get sick, bouncing back happens quicker. This isn't magic healing. It's your system finally having enough resources to maintain itself right because you've quit burning all your energy on stress responses to threats that aren't real. Pain changes what it means when you can keep coherence through discomfort. This is maybe the most unexpected finding. That sensation in your lower back that used to take over your whole awareness becomes just one piece of data among many. You can feel it completely without it eating you up. Often you'll find that how intense pain feels is directly connected to how much you resist it. When you quit fighting the sensation, when you can be coherent while also being uncomfortable, the felt experience of suffering drops dramatically, even when the physical sensation stays put. This doesn't mean you ignore injury or skip necessary medical help. It means you can respond the right way to your body's signals without piling mental suffering on top of physical sensation. Conflict transforms when you can stay coherent during disagreement. This might be the most practically valuable use in daily life. You know those fights where you say stuff you don't mean, where you're reacting instead of responding, where afterwards you can barely recall what set off the explosion? That's being out of coherence, cascading through interaction. When you can keep your center during tough talks, something remarkable happens. You can hear what the other person is actually saying underneath their defensive words. You can feel their fear or hurt or confusion without taking it personally. You can respond to their actual need instead of reacting to how they're presenting it aggressively. This doesn't mean you become passive or okay with harmful behavior. It means you can set boundaries clearly, speak hard truths directly, and hold your ground when needed, all while staying connected to both your own humanity and the other person's. The people in your life will spot this shift before you do. They'll mention that you seem different, more solid, less reactive. Some will find it comforting. Others will find it threatening because your coherence makes their lack of it more obvious, and that can feel exposing. Kids respond to coherent adults with instant trust. If you spend any time around young children, you'll notice they're incredibly sensitive to field states. They move toward coherent people instinctively and get thrown off around people who aren't coherent. This is why some adults can walk into a room full of wild children and bring order without raising their voice, while others can yell instructions over and over and get completely ignored. It's not about authority or personality. It's about field coherence. Children's nervous systems are hunting for stable outside regulation before they've built internal capacity, and they can detect who's offering genuine stability versus who's broadcasting anxiety disguised as control. Animals show the same sensitivity. That dog who's usually anxious becomes calm around certain people. That cat who hides from visitors seeks out someone specific. That horse who's tough to handle becomes cooperative under particular riders. They're all responding to coherence. Animals haven't been trained to ignore their somatic sensing the way humans have. They work entirely through direct field detection, which makes them reliable indicators of someone's actual state, no matter what that person believes they're putting out. In the comments, drop one thing that you deeply desire. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's a happy relationship. Maybe it's a healthy and fit body. Maybe it's something uniquely yours. Let this be a small but profound declaration, a signal to the universe you send not just in this space but in the quantum field. Financial patterns start shifting in unexpected ways. This isn't about manifesting money through positive thoughts. It's about making clear choices from coherent states instead of fear-based reactions. When you're coherent, you can tell the difference between genuine opportunity and desperate grabbing. You can feel the difference between an investment lined up with your values and one that just looks good on paper. You spend money differently, not from depriving yourself or going wild, but from clear sensing of what actually serves your wellness. Over time, this builds more stable financial foundations than any amount of worried penny-pinching or reckless risk-taking. Creativity works through different mechanics. When you're coherent, instead of forcing inspiration or waiting helplessly for the muse to show up, you learn to set up conditions where creative insight can surface naturally. You discover that original thinking doesn't come from your rational mind trying harder. It comes from your system being relaxed and coherent enough that new connections can form. The best ideas arrive in the shower, on walks, in that space just before sleep, all moments when your conscious control relaxes and coherence naturally rises. Professional success follows different rules for people working from this understanding. They're not necessarily more ambitious or hardworking than their peers. They're more careful about where they point their energy. They say no to opportunities that would need them to abandon coherence to chase. They say yes to challenges that let them bring their full capacity. Over time, this builds a career path that looks unusual from outside, but feels deeply right from inside. They're not climbing someone else's ladder. They're building their own structure based on what their system tells them is worth chasing. The relationships you form from coherent states carry different qualities than ones formed from neediness or performing. There's less drama, Not because you avoid conflict, but because you don't create unnecessary chaos. There's more depth, not because you're trying to be intimate, but because being real is your default mode. People know where they stand with you because you're not sending mixed signals. Your yes means yes. Your no means no. Your maybe means you need more information. This clarity is rare enough that it becomes one of your most valuable gifts in any relationship. What you'll discover is that coherence isn't just a personal practice. It's a different way of participating in life. You're not trying to control outcomes or force reality to match what you want. You're learning to sense what wants to happen and lining yourself up with that movement. Sometimes what wants to happen matches your desires. Sometimes it doesn't. But you find that following the coherent path, even when it splits from your plans, consistently leads somewhere more interesting than where your limited view thought you should go. This is the territory the 1% move through, not because they have special abilities, but because they've learned to trust a guidance system that everyone has, but most people override constantly. Your next step isn't complicated. Pay attention. Notice when you're coherent and when you're not. Start making small choices that honor what your system is telling you. The rest unfolds naturally from there. Make sure you share this video with your loved ones. Remember, you're not just sharing, you're spreading consciousness and coherence. That positive energy will come back to help you manifest everything you commented about today. Be the friend who shares breakthroughs, not just memes. Share this with someone stuck. But here's the question that will stay with you long after you've finished reading this. What if the person you've been trying so hard to become, through effort and pushing, is actually less real than the person you naturally are when you stop trying? What if everything you've been taught about self-improvement has been leading you away from yourself instead of toward it? And what if the exhaustion you feel isn't from not doing enough, but from spending years performing a version of you that was never meant to exist in the first place? Like, if you felt it, share it with someone who needs it, and comment what clicked for you. Oh, and subscribe, because this is just the beginning.